All right. Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today for our Ghost Lunchers lunch break lecture. My name is Megan Burns, and I am the programs manager at Morris-Jumel Mansion. Got a few more people coming in here. We will begin shortly. Lots of people interested in the paranormal. All right. So we're really glad that all of you could join us over lunch today. And we're excited to add another installment into our lunch break lecture series here at the mansion. Lunch break lectures are really an opportunity for members of the Morris-Jumel Mansion community to highlight some of the unique aspects of the mansion. Every lecture looks at a brief overview of the mansion's 255-year history before each presenter dives into sharing one of their favorite elements connected with Morris-Jumel. Today we have our esteemed Director of Visitor Services and Engagement, Chris Davalos, who's also our resident paranormal expert. And before Chris begins today, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the program format as well as your Zoom navigation tools. All right. So first things first, Chris is going to speak for about 20 to 25 minutes today. We will have a few pauses for audience questions or other features such as a poll, which I will launch momentarily. And at the end of his presentation, we will have at least 10 minutes for audience Q&A. We are also recording today's lecture, so if you don't wish to be recorded, please take this opportunity. If you're looking at your Zoom screen, you can move your cursor to bring up the Zoom navigation bar at the bottom. To the lower left, you'll see there's a mute button, which you don't need to worry about. Everyone's automatically muted when they enter this event. But if you don't wish to be recorded, you're welcome to also shut off your video using the icon there, or to leave today's lecture. So if you decide to remain, you are giving your consent to be recorded today. Also, if you wish to ask the panelist questions, please make use of your chat box today. So if you, again, look at the Zoom navigation tab, right in the center, you can see a little icon that says chat. If you click on that, you will be able to type in questions. So we will get to as many as we can, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. So without further ado, I would like to turn the presentation over to Chris. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Megan. Great to be here. Welcome, everyone. Great to have you here with us virtually. I am here on one of my favorite days at the mansion. I am actually here alone. Well, maybe not alone. We'll see. And it's one of my favorite days because it's dark, stormy, gloomy. I'm in heaven right now. So I'm in my element. And we're going to talk about some wonderful aspects of the history of the mansion. For those of you who are not familiar, here is our front entrance.
Oh.
Sorry, Chris, you muted
Chris.
for a
Hold
second.
on.
We've got you on mute, Chris. If you could unmute yourself.
How's that?
Perfect.
Yep.
So we lost you at.
Did you hear anything, or it was just parts of it?
If you could just take it from the top, please.
Okay. All right. So welcome, everyone. As Megan mentioned, my name's Chris. I'm the Director of Visitor Services and Engagement here at the Morris-Jumel Mansion. I also do paranormal investigations, not only here at the mansion, but also with a group called Gotham Paranormal Research Society, which is a TAPS family member. If you remember the show Ghostlunchers, or even now the new generation called Ghost Nation, that is Jason, and that's the group I belong to. It's a lot of fun. And we're going to be talking about history a little bit, but we're really here more for the ghosts and a little bit more of a spookier element with this. So there, yeah, I love this image. This is from a masquerade ball that we had. But let's talk a little bit about the history. So originally this home was built in 1765 for Colonel Roger Morris and his wife Mary Phillips. He is a retired British colonel, and they wanted a summer home. So this is 11 miles from the city. It's on over 130 acres, so it is river to river property, and it's the second highest point in Manhattan. So you'd actually be able to see from here at the mansion down the South Street Seaport, see the ships come in, which if you live here in New York, you can't even see across the street. So, and they would enjoy it as a summer home for about 10 years. But when the American Revolution really starts to get intense, they really don't want to be here for this. And George Washington actually got the intelligence and military intelligence and gossip that this home was empty. And where was Washington? He's in Brooklyn, and he was losing badly. The biggest casualties of the American Revolution actually took place in Brooklyn. So it was devastating, and he really needed to get out of there. And so he retreats safely here to what was called Mount Morris at the Morris-Jumel Mansion. And that was September 14th, 1776. 2 days later is the Battle of Harlem Heights, just south of here. And he won. This is the site of Washington's first victory against the British in New York. This was a huge morale booster, as you can imagine. So this was very important for Washington. Major success for him in that standpoint. And he would be here for about 5 weeks, but he would push north to Westchester. The British take over the home. They also installed German Hessian soldiers here as well. One of the purported ghosts we have in the house is a Hessian, which we will get to. But after the war, the Morrises lose the rights to the home because they were loyalists. These two farmers bought it. They turned into a tavern. They go belly up. And then it was in 1810 that Stephen Jumel and Eliza Jumel, pictured here, they purchased the home also as a summer home. They have a home in downtown. They have a home in Paris. And they dress up this house to the nines. They're not accepted by society, mind you, so they're looking to be better than the Joneses, if you will. So all the finest furnishings of 19th century France and America will be here. They're actually one of the biggest art collecting couples at the time. So very much in the wealth and in the know in terms of art and what they wanted to do to establish themselves, even though they weren't accepted by society. In 1832, Stephen Jumel has an accident, passes away, and that is when Eliza Jumel, in this very room, in our French parlor, marries Vice President Aaron Burr. And Burr, of course, was most well known for the duel with Hamilton. He was also vice president to Thomas Jefferson. And that didn't go very well. So he basically started to steal her money. She was the richest widow in New York at the age of 59, self-taught businesswoman. She had no education coming out of Rhode Island. So she's an amazing, brilliant woman, Eliza Jumel. And Burr wants to hook up with all that money. He's 77, she's 59. She wants that social status by marrying Burr. And so it's a marriage of convenience. So they got married here. But she kicks him out after a few months because he's spending all of her money. Starts having an affair with a 24-year-old, you can put the rest together. So she kicks him out. She files for divorce with none other than Alexander Hamilton Jr., just to stick it to Burr one more time. And then basically, he dies on the day the divorce is supposed to be finalized. And speaking of death, sadly, but it was a full life, Eliza Jumel passed away here in this room at the age of 90 in 1865. So she practically outlives everyone else. And it's an amazing history with her. The furniture that you see here is French, some considered to be Napoleonic. So an amazing history with that. But that is our history. But now we're going to talk about those who maybe possibly remain here. Now, we have known deaths in the house and unknown or purported deaths, I should say. The known deaths, Stephen Jumel, 1832. The rumor has it that Eliza Jumel killed her husband, Stephen. That is not true. You'll see different stories on TV and things like that. It makes for great drama on TV, but the reality is he died of pneumonia from complications from a tragic accident he actually had. It was gruesome. He actually fell off a cart and landed on a pitchfork. Ouch. But she did not kill him. She did not unloosen his bandages while he was convalescing and made him bleed out. These are the urban legend stories. Much of that was created, of course, by her grandson, who was written out of the will. Oh, convenient, right? Mm-hmm. So you can figure it out with that one. So Stephen Jumel, Eliza Jumel passed away here. Now, purported deaths. There was purportedly a Hessian soldier when he was stationed here. He was going from the 3rd floor to the 2nd floor. And this is a shot I took a couple weeks ago of the 3rd floor going to the 2nd floor. Check out that dude's mustache. It's really cool, right? He was slipped, tripped, and accidentally fell on his own bayonet and died right on that landing area. And I've actually had a disembodied voice experience with a male voice saying hello to me when I was completely alone in the house as I was turning the corner there. So that is one of the deaths that is purported here. People said they have seen the Hessian, that they have heard the Hessian. Some say they have smelled. I know it sounds a little gross, the Hessian. Often throughout the centuries, there's been the idea that sometimes certain spirits will give off certain scents or odors, and this would be a heavy male body odor. I know that sounds a little gross. I know it's a lunch break thing, so hopefully you weren't mid-bite on something, because that is a little gross. But these are some of the things that we do look for actually in paranormal investigating. So pretty interesting with that. Let's see, we can go to the next slide with that one. Now, our most famous ghost story is Eliza Jumel herself. And Eliza actually was reporting about things happening in the house that she couldn't explain when she was alive. So for us, our paranormal history actually goes back to the 18 teens. But when Eliza passes away in 1865, her relatives who are now living in the house claim to hear her or see her. But in January of 1964, a group of school kids arrived, and they were here for a tour like we always do for decades. And the curator who was supposed to give the tour, she was late. There was a problem with the train. Some things don't change. And so what are they doing? They're kids. They're outside in a park. We're set inside a 2-acre park. They're running around, having fun, probably trying to stay warm as well. And this woman, looking just like in that portrait you see on your left there, comes out onto the balcony that you see on the right and goes, shh, be quiet or go home. Now, the kids and the teacher see her, but they don't think a whole lot of it. They think she's actually like a tour guide or a reenactor because of how she's dressed. So they go on about their business. The curator finally arrives and she says, look, I'm so sorry. I had a problem with the train. Let's go ahead and open up the house and we'll start the tour. So they open up the house, they see the 1st floor, they see the octagon room, which if you haven't been here, we actually have what's considered the very first 8-sided octagon shaped room in the colonies. So they see all of that. But as they're going to the 2nd floor, they see this grand portrait that you see here in your shot. And they see Eliza and they said, hey, that's the lady that told us to be quiet. Where is she? So the curator looks at the teacher and she says, what are they talking about? And basically, what's so cool about this is that the teacher goes, is she part of the tour? Where is she? We want to see her. And the curator's like, guys, that's Eliza Jumel. She's been dead for almost 100 years. And of course, she shows them their bedroom, her bedroom, Eliza's bedroom here, to say, this is where she passed away. So that is our most famous ghost story. And of course, it got the attention of the media. As you saw, the newspapers had started to run with it here in New York. That also caught the attention of Hans Holzer, who is actually a psychologist. If you just heard that, my window screen just came down on its own. I'm not saying that's paranormal. It could just be the air conditioning, but we'll keep going with that. As I'm trying to talk about a seance, that was a little weird, not planned. I don't do anything for effect, mind you. So don't think I'm trying to do something to scare you or provoke you. That just happened. It's life. It'd probably chalk it up to the air conditioning. Anyways, I digress. Things happen in the house and that we can't explain. Hans Holzer, NYU, parapsychologist. He asked for permission to come and do an investigation, which is really weird because back then they didn't talk about ghosts. They didn't talk about anything like that. But I think the curator was really curious herself about what was going on. So she invited Hans Holzer to come and do a seance. And so that's what he did. And that started to put us on the map in the 20th century. And then what we really got put on the map paranormally was with the advent of cable TV and these shows like Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventures, which We've been on Ghost Adventures season 9, episode 3. If you haven't seen it, go for it. It's on YouTube, I'm sure, Travel Channel. We're also on the Holster Files, which aired last year, its first season. We're episode 2, so you can check us out there. But that kind of gives you a background into our history with that in terms of why the fascination. So we decided a few years ago, everyone keeps asking about this. So why don't we give them what they want as a form of a public program? And so that's what we've done in the last few years. And so now we have, next slide, we actually do investigations here for the public as well as private investigations.
Actually, Chris, if I could just interject briefly before we get into this, this would be a great time to review our poll. Our poll question was, do you believe in the paranormal? And the options were yes, no, and uncertain. An overwhelming majority of our participants today, 71%, about 32 out of 45 said yes.
Wow.
Only 2 people, or 4%, said no. And then we've got some healthy skeptics here, uncertain at 24%. So
excellent. I love that.
Thank you for answering that. And it also, the chat is going wild with the question, people sharing their paranormal experiences. So keep them coming.
Very cool.
Chris, back to you.
My favorite type of person to come here, and we love when everyone comes here, don't get me wrong. But if there is a favorite child, if you will, within the family, it's the skeptic. I love when non-believers come here. I am a skeptical believer. So like I said, you have to tick off a lot of boxes for me to believe. But when someone comes here who's a major skeptic, that's what I live for. It's when those who come here kind of amped up and they're like, oh, that's a ghost, that's a ghost. Everything is like, no, that's actually a car. That's a dog outside. I try to kind of get everyone to kind of decompress, if you will, when it comes to the paranormal in the house. But we do investigations here. As you can see, it's equipment based. So we don't do anything for quote unquote entertainment value. There are no hidden actors in the house that are going to jump out and scare you. There are no speakers with sound effects happening, none of that. The investigation that we do here, both from a public and a private side of doing things, is equipment based. And some of this equipment you see here, I have actually here with me. One of them is a K2 meter. And K2 meters are actually made for electricians and plumbers, so they don't electrocute themselves when they go drilling into walls and whatnot. It's what we call an EMF meter, or electromagnetic fields. It is believed that if ghosts do exist as spirits, they emit energy or radiate energy, and that is their essence, if you will. And so these types of meters ideally can kind of pick up on that. Now, if you've noticed, there's a meter that's towards behind me where Eliza's little portrait is, that's been going off. That's not Eliza as far as I'm concerned. I am in a room that has a lot of EMF because we have multiple computers, Wi-Fi, DSL, etc. So that's what I call a debunk in the world of paranormal activity. We debunk that or prove it false, that it's not paranormal because of the amount of electronics in here. But I do have it on just so you can get an idea of some of the things that happen. With that said, I've investigated in many places. I have never been in a location that has as much EMF as does this home. We can't explain why, it just is what it is. Now, if you see here, we created what's called a paranormal runway on that picture on the left. What I'm doing, you'll see me in the very far background. What I'm doing is starting to give the history of the mansion. And if you notice, I try to tell people, look down, don't look at me. Some of course looked at the camera to take the shot, but I have them looking down at the meters because as I'm talking, and those of you who are on this virtual chat with us and have been on an investigation, you can attest to this. While I say a certain name sometimes or a date, then the meters react to it and go off. It's fascinating because most of the time they're at that steady level of flat green. And then if I say a specific name or date, boom, we'll get a flash with that. We've actually had it where all 20 something of them flashed at the same time, which we couldn't explain. Some of the other equipment that we use is what's called a REM pod. You'll see that on the bottom right of your screen. And actually I have one set up here, which I'll show you. This picks up static electricity, but you have to get super close to make it go off. We've actually had this go off in both types of investigations where we were all on the second floor and one of these went off on the first floor, which we can't explain, but I'll show you how this one works real quick. So as you get closer, that's what kind of picks up with that. So these are all devices that we use. These are very simple devices. We use motion sensor lights, which you can get at Home Depot or Lowe's, things like that. We've had those go off facing away from us with nobody even near them. So it's pretty fascinating with that in terms of some of the things that we do. Active rooms, Eliza Jumel's bedroom, and especially Stephen Jumel or Aaron Burr's bedchamber. That particular room is extremely high in EMF and activity, REM pods, all sorts of things. We actually, when I was here with Gotham Paranormal, our leader, Angela, we set up a lot of video. For those of you who love these shows on TV, like Ghost Adventures or Tennessee Raid Chasers, those guys, or Ghost Nation, Ghost Hunters, all these shows, let me give you a quick little snippet on what goes into these shows. It takes about a week to film. For a TV show, it's about 42 plus minutes for a full thing of showtime, because then you have to add in commercials. Evidence actually caught on camera, if they're lucky, it's 30 seconds to a minute, really. The majority of ghost hunting is you're sitting in a room in the dark, just listening and taping. And for a lot of people, it's quite boring. For those of us who do it, we live for it because we're always looking for that golden nugget. And when we were at here in the mansion, it was summertime, it was pretty hot. We actually captured what we call an EVP, or electronic voice phenomenon. And what that is, there's different what we call grades of EVPs. This is what we call a class 1 or a grade A type of EVP because it's very distinct. So what we're setting up here, you're going to see a young man with a guitar. Like, what's he doing in that with that guitar? Those of you are familiar too with that chair may look familiar if you're a Hamilton or Lin-Manuel Miranda fan. That's the chair where Lin-Manuel Miranda actually wrote parts of the musical. There you go, there's a nice close-up of that. Normally we have equipment set up for it. Lin came in and asked if he could channel his inner Burr. So whatever happened in that room, it worked, as we know. Especially with Hamilton, that's going to be aired on July 3rd, I believe. So you can check that out. So Lin is from the neighborhood. He's a friend of ours. So we were grateful for that opportunity to have him here. But he also sat in probably one of the most haunted pieces of furniture in the mansion. So you'll see in the picture there, when we go back to the other slide, the young man with the guitar, and he is basically, what we're trying to do is what's called a Singapore effect. A Singapore effect in paranormal terms is we're trying to recreate an environment through music or an experience where if there is a spirit in that house, it's going to, I don't want to say provoke, but it's going to make them want to interact and maybe get excited about what they're hearing. Instead of just saying, hi, is there anyone here in the room with us? Can you please let us know? We do that. But when you do a Singapore effect by introducing music or theatrical aspects, we often find that it engages ghosts or spirits if those things actually exist. So we're going to play this a few times because it's going to go quick. It's only a few seconds. It's going to happen in the first couple seconds. I just want you to hear it first, and then I'll talk, and then we'll play it back again, and then a third time. So if we could go ahead and play that.
Let's see if anything generates over here.
Should we go to Washington room? Yeah, that's.
Okay. I don't know if you heard it. It's right in the first couple seconds. When we play it again, look for my hands, and I'm going to do an up-down thing when it actually happens. So let's go one more time.
Let's see if anything generates over here.
Should we go to
Do you hear it?
Washington room? Yeah, that's.
Okay. First thing I want you to notice with this. Did you have a question, Megan?
I was going to say, if you've heard it, please tell us in the chat. It seems like a few people, Jen and Jody, heard it. In addition to that, if you did hear it, tell us what you think you heard. Thanks.
So with this, if you notice, no one in the room is reacting. I was actually standing to the left entrance of the room. We're just setting up. But with groups like TAPS or Gotham Paranormal, we have a lot of video equipment. So it's a lot of time setting up. So we have the video running because it was already set up, but we were still finishing, as you can see. Do you notice that no one in the room reacts to it? That's because no one in the room heard it. I heard nothing. My colleagues heard nothing. This wasn't until Angela from Gotham actually went back a week later to review all of this video that we did that night. And then she's like, guys, you're not gonna believe what I came across this. She lengthened it, she slowed it down. I don't wanna say what I think it is yet, because I wanna play it one more time, because I don't wanna skew you towards it, but we'll go ahead and play it one more time, and it's right at the first couple seconds. So let's do it one more time.
Let's see if anything turns out.
Dude, should we go to Washington room? Yeah, that's.
Okay, so as Megan had mentioned, we'd love to hear your comments and things like that. It is kind of like a screech that I interpret it as they're gonna laugh at you. Some interpret it as he doesn't love you. I don't know. All I know is that it's fascinating and it's something that we can't logically explain. This is on digital equipment. The old days of analog and tapes, you can easily chalk this up to saying there's corruption on the tape or things like that. But from a digital perspective, it's clean. So this, if you've ever wanted to see a Class A EVP, this is almost as good as it gets. So it's pretty fun with that.
So a lot of people seem to think that the voice is a woman's voice. And saying, I want you, or we like you, or we don't like you.
Interesting. A lot of people, we've had so much activity in this room. Again, we don't actually know how many people may have passed away in this room, or actually in this house, I should say. The room, we have an idea, but there are possibly have been men who died of their wounds during the Battle of Harlem Heights that were being cared for kind of as a quasi-hospital at the house. It was a tavern after the war, which all sorts of craziness went on in taverns. It was like the Wild West. There was no law. So who knows if people would have been murdered or killed in these types of places. So we don't really know. But for whatever reason, this room tends to be one of our most active rooms that we've had. Even on the Holster files, they claim to have gotten some things. So if you get a chance to check that out too, definitely check that out. It's pretty fascinating.
Chris, before you go on, we just have a couple more requests to play it one more time.
Sure. Yeah, go for it.
Dude, should we go to Dude, should we go to Dude, should we go to Washington room? Yeah, that's.
So, you make of it what you will with that. I leave it up to you. Like I said, my job is not to convince you that ghosts exist. My job is just to present the evidence, and then you can make of it what you will. But it is very fascinating and always fun. I've never really had any, first of all, let me also say, this is not like when you're viewing this, it's not like be like the movie like The Ring and weird stuff's gonna follow you home through your computer or anything like that. So just a heads up with that. Most ghost hunting is not about demons or looking to perform some crazy exorcism. None of that. For us, it is a fascinating topic. As a member of Gotham Paranormal, it's a nonprofit. We actually make zero money. So those of you, in all seriousness, if you feel you have a problem in your home or business, if you see someone that says, hey, I can take care of that for you for $300 or $500 or whatever, they're probably charlatans looking to just take advantage of you because you're at a time of need. With that said, folks like TAPS or Gotham Paranormal, we charge zero, nothing at all. Our mentality is if you're having a problem, we just want to help you if we can. Or at least oftentimes we've gone to a location, guess what? It's raccoons in the attic. It's not ghosts, it's just raccoons. Or because they started to do some renovation work or other aspects that has nothing to do with paranormal. 90 to 95% of cases are not paranormal. They can actually be logically deduced to something that's something we can relate with. That's just a logical conclusion. So, but with that said, it is a fascinating topic. Now, this was a masquerade gala that we had in October, of course, best month, my favorite month. as a fundraiser. We're a nonprofit, but we have to raise money like any other museum or nonprofit. Even though it's city-owned, we don't get a blank check. So we do lots of events here, including paranormal and masquerade balls and lectures and concerts to raise money for the mansion. This was a fundraiser. It was torrential rain that night, and it was a packed house. Everyone had gotten inside. Our photographer, we asked Nick to wait until all the rain was done to get some really cool outside shots because we had these rented LED lights. And so he waited, and he did shutter shots, which are multiple shots in a row with his digital camera. So I want you to take a look at these shots that we're doing, because tell me if you notice anything different on the porch. So this is the first shot. Here's the second shot, and then the third shot. Did you see anything in the second shot?
Jen sees it.
There. We'll hold it there for you. That image on the porch. So when Vinny, who was our public programs manager at the time, Nick sent him all this digital download folder. So Vinny was going through it. And then he called Nick and says, hey, you know, I asked you to get some shots of the outside, the exterior, but I didn't want anyone in the shots, but I noticed you got someone in the shot. And he says, no, I didn't. He goes, nah, there's someone on the porch. He goes, no, trust me. He goes, I waited till everyone was inside. First, I had to wait for the rain to stop. Then I waited for everyone to be inside. He goes, Vinny, I wouldn't have taken these pictures if there was someone on the porch. Now, again, keep in mind, let's debunk here. Let's do logical deduction. These are shutter shots. These are bop, 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 bop. These are really quick in a row. The first shot doesn't have it, and the third shot doesn't have it. But this second shot in the middle has that dark image. It looks like a person. It's fascinating. Am I going to tell you that's a ghost? I can't, because as we like to say here, you know, I will say, I've never been dead, so I don't know. And that is true, but it is fascinating. Now, again, we go back to, when do you start to see a pickup in activity? For us, when we have plays here, obviously paranormal investigations, masquerade balls, large gatherings, we tend to see, it's like, oh, cool, party. I want to be a part of it. It's almost like that. It is fascinating. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a background in terms of our paranormal history of those who died and those who purportedly died. And hopefully when we are back to normal, we are phase 4 and we will be in a post-COVID world. We'll be able to open up again, and you too can experience some of these awesome things. But just to see the mansion itself, aside from the paranormal, is unbelievable. It's a real treasure. So I hope you enjoyed this.
Thank you so much, Chris. And before we open it up to a more general Q&A via the chat box, Eliza, could you advance the slide, please? Great. So there's many more ways to connect with Morris-Jumel virtually in the coming weeks. On Monday, we'd like to cordially invite you to another lunch box or lunch break lecture at 1 p.m. With one of our fabulous educators, Angela, who's going to guide us on a closer look at portraiture at the mansion. And of course, Eliza will be featured quite prominently. Then on Saturday next month, on July 11th at 1, you can join us for our virtual Con Ed Family Day, and with Daniela, make a paper star banner. And finally, if you like Eliza so much that just one Eliza is not enough, you can join us on Wednesday, July 15th at 7 p.m. When Professor Catherine Manthorn will tell us a little bit about both Eliza Jumel and her artistic counterpart, Eliza Greatorax. So visit our website, morrisjumel.org, for more information. So keep those questions coming in the chat. I know I posed one as to whether anyone here would like to experience a paranormal event, and it looks like some of you already have. Ooh, so Karen has a great question for you, Chris.
Okay.
Have the spirits of any of the original occupants, the Morris family, those loyalists, ever been experienced?
That's a great question. The Morrises, after they lost the right to the home, ended up fleeing to London and then eventually relocated in York in the northeast of England. I actually have a friend that lives in New York, and she actually sent me the burial areas or the grave sites of the Morrises, which was really cool, just to kind of see that. With that said, again, if they decide they want to come on, pop over a visit across the pond, possibly, but historically, in terms of those who have encountered things here, not so much in terms of the Morrises or any of their descendants from Phillipsburg Manor or here in New York. So it is pretty fascinating with that. Even though, and what's fascinating is that we have had, you know, clairvoyants, medium psychics over the years come here. For some reason, Aaron Burr probably still thinks it's his house because that's the kind of dude he was. And so Burr's presence or activity seems to be here more, even though he was only here for a few months. Maybe he felt the home should have always been his. Who knows?
Maybe he wants
Great question.
to do some better PR after the Hamilton
Uh-huh.
musical came out.
Chris, there was a rumor that Burr had actually looked at the house in 1800 when it was up for sale, and so there is a possibility that he felt you know, a connection to it even before he lived here.
Mm-hmm.
So Lee, or Leah, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, I hope I am, has another question. Are there other historic house museums in New York City that have had similar experiences of the paranormal?
Sure. So we actually belong to the Historic House Trust of New York. So it's ourselves and 22 other sister properties in the 5 boroughs. And while I can't speak for all of them, one house that does talk about these openly is the Merchants House Museum downtown on East 4th Street. I believe, well, pre-COVID, they would do ghost stories and tours. I believe we're one of the only historic houses other than historic Richmond Town that does an instrument-based paranormal investigation. But there seems to be that fascination and element with all of the properties. One of those properties is Edgar Allan Poe Cottage in the Bronx. I am a huge Poe fan, as most of you who do know me know that. So it is pretty fascinating that the idea of historic properties have this sense of the paranormal about it.
And then Mary has another question. Have any of the spirits made you feel uncomfortable or not welcomed? And if so, how do you deal with those situations?
Well, the experience as a whole, no, to be honest. And I tell people, when you come here, if you like the house, the ghosts like you. As a whole, the energy here is really positive. It's a good vibe here. With that said, that experience down in the basement with the 2 gals laughing and the table being pulled and all of that stuff, I got to tell you, that made me jump out of my seat. It was a bit scary. 1, because I actually thought someone broke into the house. But 2, it's post-event scary, like what the hell was that? Because not only did I hear 2 voices, I physically saw the object had shifted from, not obviously at the time it happened, but was shifted from how we had it set up. So the idea that I had physical evidence brings it home in a big way. Yeah.
And then Camilla has a question about Eliza Jumel, who also may have thought that the house was haunted during her tenure. Can you tell us a little bit more about what we know about that?
Sure. Well, for officially, our haunted history goes back to the 18 teens. It's also possibly the Jumels may have gotten a better deal on the house because of a supposed haunted history. With all of that said, it was almost fashionable in the 18th and 19th centuries to say your house is haunted. Why would that be? Well, because if my house is so important that the ghosts want to stay there even after they pass away when they were living, then my house must be really special. So it almost gets into a bragging rights type of thing. Well, my house is so good, it's haunted. In the 19th century, the latter part of 19th century, you really start to see that with the spiritualism movement and seances and table tipping and all those aspects that we won't get into that now. But if you're fascinated by this topic, definitely check out 19th century aspects as far as like Victorian aspects of it in terms of the paranormal.
Great. So we've got time for a few more questions and stories. And Eliza, I mean, Meg, Do you have any experiences in the house that you'd like to share?
Well, actually, Vanessa shared an experience. I felt cold spots in the parlor at the mansion in the middle of the summer during a paranormal investigation. Equipment also picked up the spirits in the lower kitchen entryway on the third floor. So Vanessa, I have also had the experience of, here, I will lift my morning veil so you can see my face. I've also had the experience of cold spots in the middle of the summer when sweat was literally dripping down my legs. One of the really unique things that we do in the house is we will separate the groups. So we'll have the women go into Eliza's room at one point, and the men will go into Aaron Burr's room because, you know, remember in the 19th century, men would not be caught in a madam's bedroom, you know, so we separate, and we often find that a lot of activity occurs during that separation. I was sitting on the floor because we were heat rises, so we were sitting on the floor trying to cool down, and there was a very distinct small field or circle of cold air between me and one of the former directors, and all of the people from the other side of the room came over and could distinctly feel it. It was maybe 1.5 feet off the ground, and no higher than that. I've also had experiences in the basement. There is a light there that consistently flickers on and off. I have seen it turn on once while looking at it, and there are a couple of light switches in the basement that don't work. So I had looked at the pole where the switches were just to see, oh, did I turn that off? Do I need to turn it off? And then I looked over to the light to see if they were on, and it flashed. So yeah, I've definitely had that very varying experiences, you know, not just electrical. And I've been on some of the tours with Chris where the motion detector is facing the wall, there's nobody there, and then the light goes off.
Great. And then Jenny also has a question a little bit about the history of the house and any connections with George Washington. She says, I love the history of the home. Is it true that George Washington also used the home as a site for a cabinet dinner during his first administration? Who was there? When did that happen? Did any of the guests stay overnight there?
Yeah, great question. Washington, in terms of being a general and as a president, is part of our history here at Morris-Jumel. July 10th, 1790, he actually had a cabinet dinner here. It was, as I mentioned before, it was a tavern, so he took over the whole place. We used to interpret it. It's great for school kids, but so they could relate to a space. But the fact is, it was a large entourage. They would have taken over the entire mansion. They were probably dining al fresco. It's July 10th. I always tell people, if you live in New York, it's pretty hot and gross now. Imagine when there was no plumbing or sewers. So really gross. So it was a really great move by Washington. It's almost like a corporate retreat. Like, let's get out of the city in the sense and come up to the country where it's bucolic and beautiful and we can talk. To be a fly on that wall would have been amazing because you have in attendance Washington, Jefferson, Hamilton, Adams, Secretary Warnock, Abigail Adams, Martha Washington, Eliza Hamilton, they're all there. So it must have been fascinating to have been a fly on the wall, especially listening to Jefferson and Hamilton trying to sway Washington on where the direction of this new country should go.
All right.
Martha asked a question a little earlier, whether or not there had ever been a nun sighted. And now she's also sharing that she lives in the neighborhood. And one day they were playing on the grounds with the ball and lost it. And a nun came with a little boy in the opposite direction from where we'd lost the ball and gave us the ball. We still remember it. Have there ever been any nun sightings?
I have never heard, I don't know if anyone else, Shiloh's on this call too. I've never heard of that in my life. With that said, I always tell people, if you're a spirit, I guess you can go wherever you want. Or if they're attracted to kids, or if they're attracted to certain people, that just may be. With that said, we have letters in our archives of people who live in the neighborhood who are writing about and sending in these letters about having experiences that they can't explain. For example, someone would be living across the street and then they see lights going off and on at 2 or 3 in the morning when there was nobody here. This is before we had caretakers living here 24/7. This is before the age of caretakers. So literally there's no one in the house, lights going off and on. We still have that issue here where lights mysteriously go off and on that we can't explain. Seeing actual apparitions of people moving in the house when there's nobody there. So my attitude is, well, if you saw that and you for sure saw that, then it is what it is. But in terms of the nun aspect, I've never heard of that, but I find that fascinating.
Couple other questions or thoughts on the chat about when will the mansion and the surrounding park be reopened? And I actually can field that one. So as a historic house and museum, Morris-Jumel Mansion and the surrounding Roger Morris Park are part of the Phase 4 reopening part of the New York City plan. So until we are cleared to go into Phase 4 by the city government, we will remain closed. However, there's many ways to interact with us, again, virtually, via chats like these. And for those of you whose curiosity were piqued by George Washington and the cabinet dinner, stay tuned. We will have more programming in relation to that coming up in early July. So definitely check our website for details. Oh. Wait, now we've got some response on the nuns. So Shiloh, our executive director, or not from the nun, about the nun,
yes.
is saying there's a nun that lives around the corner from the mansion. Really?
Yeah, we have a dear friend who actually just started volunteering with us, and she's a nun, but I've never seen her in her habit. So I don't know, maybe the mystery continues.
Good to know. Jody has a question about any books like this, about these paranormal experiences. I know, Chris, that you gave me some great learn more links that will be sent out to you shortly with a brief survey at the end of this lecture. Are there any other titles or places you can recommend?
Sure. If you're fascinated by this topic and you actually like to go to the next level, so to speak, and do things like this on your own, it doesn't cost an arm and a leg. Some people go bowling. I go ghost hunting. You know, it depends on the hobby you like. But equipment, you don't have to start getting into like expensive video equipment and, you know, infrared lighting and all this. If you have a simple digital voice recorder, there are also apps that you can get for your phone or tablet that are to do voice recordings and have your own EVP session. So there's a lot of ways that you can get into this in an inexpensive manner. If you're fascinated by this, one of the links I put up is a site that I shop with. They're very reputable. You ask any reputable paranormal investigator, they will attest to it. So they have some really cool equipment. As far as books and things go, it's tricky because, listen, people who write books, they're looking to make money. Let's be honest. Everyone's got to make a living, right? But with that said, we actually carry it in the gift shop, but you can also find it online. If you come in the gift shop, you support the mansion. So it's called Ghost. It is one of the Hans Holzer books where it has all of his investigations. It's like that thick. So it is fascinating. There are also sometimes, like, you know, hopefully post-COVID, where you have like conventions and things you can attend. I was able to meet one of my favorite investigators, which is Amy from Dead Files. So I was able to talk with her and her mom. So if you are a fan and you want to geek out with some of this stuff, it's cool. But definitely you can check us out. If you just do a Google search on YouTube, you'll find a lot of stuff about us too. But I will say once again, I'm not a big fan of the story that Eliza killed Stephen. It makes for good TV or it makes for good stories, but we just have no real proof of that. So.
Well, I feel like we could keep this chat going all afternoon, but our time is almost up. Chris, thank you again for taking us on a paranormal exploration of the mansion and its history. Meg/Eliza, thank you also for helping with the tech. Thanks to all of you lovely participants. We hope to see you again, either virtually or in person, when we're finally allowed to reopen the mansion. Thank you all. And if you have additional questions or anything, again, look for that, that follow-up email in the chat, and we will do our best to answer them. Thank you.